Okay, then hello again for another session of ZK Ask the Expert. Today talking about integrating a third-party JavaScript library into ZK, just the basics, just to see how to get things running. I'm Robert, as always, hosting this session today. Second time from home office now, and yeah, prepared hopefully not too much today, so we cover everything in time. And I think we can almost dive into it. If you have questions, post them in the chat, or as mentioned earlier, shout at me if I'm stuck somewhere. Maybe I'm missing a typo in front of my eyes. Always happens. Yeah, so it looks like a few things, but there's always a lot of details behind all these points. So don't worry. I think it's not going to be boring. And I would like to detail today how I go about integrating a third-party library in ZK, like the steps that have proven to be most useful to identify which framework works, which third-party library doesn't work, just to get a quick way to start creating a prototype, and then how to include the resources properly into a ZK application or in a ZK add-on jar if you want to separate this into a separate maven module. And then also a few conveniences, like convenience method, like adding dependencies via maven or gradle using webjars, which is a quite nice feature that recently gets more and more popular, I think. And I use this successfully in different projects already. Just to avoid manually copying around even JavaScript files and CSS files. They are also provided in jar files now. And in the end, or in the second half, we also integrate this into a ZK component and a widget, just a very basic one. So I can't cover all these. This will, all the details will take more time, but the details will be, although the basics will be good enough for this talk, I think. And just featuring a two-way communication, how to get data sent from server to client, and how to get some data back from the third-party library into your application, like custom events when when something happens in the third-party library. And what and for this kind of session, I thought the Leaflet API, the Leaflet JavaScript library is quite nice because it has something that's easy to look at. You can instantly identify what it does. Now it's like a replacement for Google Maps, which became quite expensive in the recent years. So people are sometimes looking for alternatives. There's the Open Layers JavaScript library, which is a very large library. So if you need all the geo specific features for, I don't even know what this kind of or I don't know. It has very specific terms and lots of features. And the Leaflet.js has a quite nice, simple API, easy to start, and doesn't require lots of setup code to integrate. So let's go directly into the application. This time I chose a Spring Boot application, just because it starts up easily this time. And it also shows what I found a problem was including the webjars into a Spring Boot application. Webjars are no problem in a default WAR file, but in Spring Boot there was something specific that I needed to find out to get this running. Yeah, so first we start with the prototype. I think Spring Boot we have covered several times already, so I don't explain a lot about what it does. Now we have our application class that's running, and a bit of development config we covered also in previous sessions to be more efficient. And we have a simple page, index.zulia, which just has two links to our prototype page and to our real component page. And if we start the application, I think I did this already, and just restart again, you get the run details, or the run config is also easier. Just show you it's as simple as any other Spring Boot jar file. What you do is you specify your main class to run, and I chose a few parameters for my development configuration to activate a Spring profile and to activate the hot swap agent to have a better hot code replacement. And I use Java 11, but it also works with Java 8, I think. It's nothing specific here. So it's running, it doesn't take long to start. And in the browser, we will see, if we go back, we see our starting page, and we can switch to the prototype page. Right now, it does almost nothing. So we just look what it does. So whenever I figure or try to integrate a third-party library, I start with links, or start with integrating the style sheets and the JavaScript files needed from CDN. Just download them directly from the internet, so I don't have to download anything or put into a specific location. Just load the scripts and initialize the default. Luckily, they have a good documentation on the Leaflet.js. So when you want to get started, all you need to do is create a new map. So where's the getting started link? Tutorials, quick start guide. Yeah, I almost just copied these links. Now there's a bit ZK specific, which I will tell you. So I have this link for the version 1.7.1 and also the link for the script, style sheet and script. And then there's this content integrity for security, so you're sure you're downloading the correct file, and this cross-origin thing, which is somehow needed because we load from a different domain. And I put them into these ZK processing instructions for style and adding a script tag. So these will be loaded into the head of the page. So they will be loaded before the ZK application runs, because you want this to be available at the right time. And before ZK runs, it's a good time, so we don't have to wait for anything. We can just call the code directly. And one specific thing is these script tags. If you put the cross origin as an empty string, somehow it ignores this property and doesn't render it out, and then you get cross origin errors. So just put the anonymous is anyway only for testing, just to get this running. And then you will see, we just break it. We just break one of these and check in the browser what happens if we do this. Now we open the developer tools. So if you run into this kind of problems, we see the network tab. Go on, break. You should break. Something is very slow today. Don't preserve the log and show me the console. Yeah, so here we see it has this integrity attribute, but it somehow is missing the course, the cross origin property. Well, there's now some street announcement in the background. I don't know what they're talking about. I hope it's not too loud. So if we add the anonymous and we recompile this one, Control-Shift F9, we will see that the cross origin errors go away, and all the errors go away. And in the network, we can see that the JavaScript files loaded. It loaded this external JavaScript file, and the CSS file is also loaded as expected. And we already see that the map is initializing and the styles are here. This initializing I also took from the documentation, from the quick start guide. What they say is you specify a div, you give it a height so that it has a height. It can also have a dynamic height, doesn't need to be hard coded, but you need a height. If you don't specify a height, it will default to 0 and you have nothing. That's what a div does by default if it's empty. And then all they say is you call this method L, which is the Leaflet basic how to say, that's their constant global variable, and they have a method called map, which initializes a map for the current component ID. And to set the view, they just specify the center and a zoom level to go somewhere. And I did something very similar in my code. I created this L map because I don't know the UUID in advance. I don't want to hard code it. I just pick ZK's default, ZK's unique ID, which is the DOM element ID. And I call set view at a position and a zoom level. So I do almost the same. The ZK specific part here is this W on bind event. This is a client-side event of the ZK's client-side widget lifecycle. And this will be executed whenever the DOM element is ready for, or after the DOM element is ready for this diff. So you will run this script exactly at the moment when ZK adds this diff. Sometimes there's a delay, or sometimes it's not rendered initially. So don't put this into an extra script tag below everything, because you never know if your script is running at the correct time. If you want some initializing code for a specific diff, just put it into the onBind handler. Can't be easier than that. And we make it more complicated in a second, but this is the easiest way. I just say onBind, initialize the map. And that's what we see. It's initializing the map. And right now it doesn't have any background because I didn't load any layers. So we just go to the next part in the quick start guide here. They say if you want a layer, you add a layer. Now, the layer configuration is always a bit complicated because any kind of geographic or map layers have lots of parameters. And also you need to be sure to give the credits and to add the attributions so that you have these copyright hints at the bottom. So what we can do is we initialize this map. What I did is, in order to do this, is I just at first, I'm sorry. Yeah, I want just to mention, yeah, now at least we can see it's working. If we can even drag and drop here, we just don't see anything and we don't get any console errors. So now we can use the API of the component. So what I did is I undo this simple thing. So we already know it's working. It's not breaking anything. It doesn't produce any errors. We just use the API in as it is designed by them. What I did is I signed up for these Mapbox API token, which is free for development purposes. I think, at least for demonstration purposes here, I can use it. So if you use this, please try your own token, because I will not. I will disable this at some point before they start charging me for overuse. This is something you can easily sign up at the API Mapbox. They also provide other layers like Open Layers, not OpenStreetMap, which is a bit slower. So this Mapbox uses the same graphics or the same data as OpenStreetMap, just style them in a nicer way and provide the files faster. And they have a business model behind it, so they also have a purchased version with support. I didn't go into details, just want to show something that looks nice. So we do almost the same thing, just add a small script tag with a function inside it. And we have the same diff again, just with a few more functions. Now, this is my second step in prototyping. I can have an onBind and onUnbind, which will just call methods directly. So these methods are still executed only when needed. OnBind is when the component is created. OnUnbind is when the component is detached, because sometimes you want to also dynamically add and remove elements. So it's good to clean up when you have an API to clean up. Most of these libraries provide cleanup functions. And the click function we talk about in a second. So what we have is in the init function, we provide, I specify my access token. I create the map in the same way as before. Instead of doing an inline, I have this extra method here. And I specify the tile layer as documented in the quick start guide. And the stuff below, we just ignore for now. Now we don't need this. So if I recompile, we should see that the layer is loading. Now you see, now we are City of London, and it should be the same as in the example here. Yeah, we see London. So we have integrated the quick start guide of this server, library. Now I can move around. I can resize the layer, the map. It will automatically do what it needs to do to load more tiles. I can zoom in. It will load the more details. I can zoom out. So the map is working as it should, and it shows these attributions at the bottom. So we don't have to use anything ZK specific to call the API. The only thing we need to know is the lifecycle methods on bind, on unbind, and call our arbitrary JavaScript. I'll show later how to move this out of the page into a component in widget, so you don't have to include the script in all the Zool pages. It will be nicer encapsulated in the ZK component configuration. Yes, and now because we want to work with it from the ZK side, we also try if we can do some simple commands from the, or if we can send an event from the client side to the server. So what we do is we register an on-click function on the map. So this is the Leaflet API to specify an on-click listener. And I want to call the on-map click function, which I just specified a few lines above. And in here, we can use the ZK API to fire an event directly to this client-side widget. And we also say, please also send this event to the server. And what we send with the event is the current position, the latitude, longitude of the clicked event. And you can specify any arbitrary name. I think map click is a good name because on click is a default event in ZK, which already registers every kind of click listener on normal components. So I just pick a name that is specific to my component. And we can have a listener for this event. This is now a server-side listener. You see there's no W in front. The W is the client namespace. Always to avoid confusion or to add more confusion, we use W for the client-side namespace because this is referring to widgets. And our client-side classes we call widgets. It's just historically called client. Sometimes you will see it's called C instead of W. In some of the examples, it doesn't matter. You can specify any name, any shortcut. It's just an XML feature to distinguish between client-side and server-side events. So this one is JavaScript executing, and this one is server-side bean shell executing in this case, but it could also be an event listener in your controller class, or it can be triggering a command in your view model. Doesn't matter. These custom events behave like the default ZK events, and they just create a default ZK event, which you can also specialize more. You can implement your own event class. Not the topic today, because the default event is powerful enough to send arbitrary data from the client to the server as a JSON object, and you can access it like a hash map on the server side. So all I do is I log the current click position based on the event data. And the event data we sent was here, the second parameter, the latitude, longitude of the event of the map click. And if we do this, if we click some, so you just load the map again, we click somewhere, we check the network because it will be sent via AJAX. We check any kind of AJAX request to see that something is sent to the server and that something is coming back. So I click somewhere. And first I see my event is logged out, and I see a request that is going to the server. It sends my on map click event to a component with the UUID. This kind of UUID, it's just the unique DOM ID of our div that we created earlier. And it sends the data with the position, coordinates, latitude, longitude. And in the response, we just send this information to the server. It calls the log command to have this, to display this debug window at the bottom. So we just know we received data back from the server that does something at client side. Could be opening a list box that displays details about all the available restaurants at this position. There's something you can implement yourself. I think you will have some, if you have a need for a map component, you will have some background logic about data that is relevant for the specific coordinates. Yeah, okay, let's see. I think this is always the first stage I do when implementing a component. Just try that the API initializes And I try a few simple interactions, like in this case, clicking or implement a click, because it's the simplest thing you can do, implement a click listener. There are more complicated things, like when you're moving, maybe you have to register an event when you finish moving, and then you want the updated position at server side. You can update all the markers on the current page that should be visible right now. So you can do some kind of load on demand with other events. But also there's many things that can be done. And we also want to try if we can manipulate the client-side widget from the server side. That's why I added these extra buttons at the bottom. I have one button that says go to POTX, which will execute a JavaScript at client-side. I'll also show how to do this more nicely, but this is the integration which doesn't require any other Java code. I can just directly write this into the inline in the Zool file. And we can also test if detaching will trigger the cleanup method correctly. So what I do here is when I click the button, I'll execute a JavaScript on the client-side widget with the ID map. Here I use the server-side ID, and with the dollar prefix, it will find the DOM element that corresponds to the widget with the server-side ID map. Don't mix it up with the DOM ID, which is this unique UUID, which changes from view to view. And where do we see this? Here I gave this map. Where was here? This is the ID map, and the dollar prefix says use this server-side ID. And the server-side ID is also known at client-side. That's why it can find it. And the zk dollar function is something similar to the jQuery function. Instead of finding a DOM element, it finds a zk widget. And then I know I have the my map property, which we set during the initialization function. I just say widget.mymap equals mymap, which is the map we created with the function. So we have with the initialization or constructor of the leaflet map. So we have this available later when we call this, when we call from the server. So we get the widget, we have the mymap property. Oops. We have the mymap property, and we call the setView function to update the center position and the zoom level. That's what we want to do if we want to go to POTX. So we go to POTX, and the map will update and zoom into, you see this kind of store. Our office is directly above the store. Just no one is there right now. And you'll see this is Taipei. That's where our office is located. If I go back to POTX, it will just go there again. If you're not too far away, it will have some kind of zoom in animation. That's what the leaflet component does by default. It will just center the view if you are not too far away. And if I detach the map, we can see it's cleaning up and the map is gone. Okay, we have console sources of the current page here. So we have the page source. In the Chrome developer tools, you can easily put a breakpoint in your cleanup function, for example. We saw here the cleanup map. We put a breakpoint here, and we reload the page. And if we say detach map, it will call the cleanup map function, and we will see in the stack trace that is coming from the onUnbind method. So something that was triggered by zk, this lifecycle method, and we just check the mymap whether this still exists. We have the this._mymap. Well, where does it put this? I'll just type it in the console. This._mymap undefined widget. Okay, so sorry. It's widget.mymap, this one. You see, this one is our map class, and we call the method remove based on the API of the third-party library, and then we delete the property so there is no more reference from our code. We just verify that our cleanup can work. Okay, so that's the prototype. If we want to make this a bit nicer, because in Zeek, once we decided we want to use this this third-party library in our application, maybe in multiple places, we want to use this like a ZK component. Now we would like to have our own tag, leaflet map, give it an ID, a height, and then communicate with this component from our composer or our view model by commands and binding properties. But in this case, I just demonstrate the composer, because the people who use MVVM, they usually know how to, or they should know how to operate MVVM component, or how to operate components from MVVM. Yeah. So this is what we want, but how do we achieve this? We implement our composer as we have a normal composer. This time I chose a selector composer. I have my, this is no real Java code. I have my POTX position. I have my component wired by ID. So if we check here I give it ID mymap in this case. I have a do after compose where I set the initial location. I just said go to POTX at zoom level 10. And I also want to add some markers. Very often or that's the point of the map, to indicate something on the map. So we add some markers. So we want to have a server-side method to add a marker to our map and just send some data. The marker data in this case is a method that will create a JSON object containing the information I want to use at client side. That's the easiest way you can do. Start with JSON objects and make them POJOs later, and use any kind of framework that transfers POJOs into JSON objects like Jackson or JSON or whatever their names are. There are several marshalling, unmarshalling. And yes, I will show all the code. Don't worry. Yeah, I will show the code. Just show what I want to achieve. Yeah, then we want to listen to our on map click as before, and I want to operate this data. Now we go into the leaflet map. This is the server-side implementation. I just extend HTML-based component because I don't need any other ZK features for this one, because the component handles itself internally. It's not very long, 47 lines of code, so I kept it short. And yeah, what do we see? Now I specify a constant for a click event. I add a client event, which is part of ZK's component library, to register events that will be sent eventually from the client to the server. So you don't have to use this extra attribute to server equals true, because now this is a default event. As soon as you have a listener, it will send this event to the server as well. I specify my view method to update the view, because I don't want to call the JavaScript from I don't want to include this inside this JavaScript code in my composer. I want to handle this here, and this will just produce a response to the client side, because I want to call a method at client side, which is the AU invoke, which is ZK's class to specify a Java method call on a widget directly. So what I say is invoke the function set view on the widget that corresponds to the current component. And these are the parameters to set. This can be any kind of objects. As long as they're transferable into JSON objects, you can do this. So for example, here double array will just be a list of, or an array of numbers at the client side, and a double zoom will just be a number at client side. You can put strings there. You can put hash maps that have key value pairs. And most of the things will just automatically translate. Unless you have a complex objects, then you maybe have to implement the JSON aware interface to produce the correct JSON out of it, or use one of these marshalling frameworks like JSON, Jackson, that will transfer your POJO into the JSON that you want at client side. But this is as simple as it gets. Yeah, we just invoke a method on the client side. Nothing is needed, no weird find the component by ID. That's done by ZK. It's not a new feature, something that exists since ZK5, I think, so since at least 10 years. But it's still useful and makes these things simple. In a similar way, I implemented the add marker function. I just invoke a client-side function, add marker with the marker data. I deliberately don't have a getter here because I don't want to keep the state at server side and at client side at the same time. Because when you set the view, you already know what you set. We don't need to double store it somewhere, which might get out of sync with the client side. And then you have to implement at client side something that synchronizes the data back to the server. If you can avoid it, don't do it. Just treat these things as verbs. I want to update something at client side. And whenever I'm interested in some changes, I will send an event from the client to the server. And then you get the information about something that has changed if you need this later. Yeah, like the on map click. And then I have these just a few factory functions that produce a JSON object, which is also included in ZK. You see JSON object is in the org zcos JSON class package. And it behaves like a hash map. It just has a method to output valid JSON. And you can nest objects. Now this one, it can be another JSON object or a hash map or a list of strings or numbers. So you can compose your JSON object, send it to the client side and deal with it. So this code has really no logic. It's just transferring the data and invoking client side functions. So as long as you can get away with this kind of coding, that's perfect. And then you don't have to deal with state synchronization between these between the client and server side. Just passing the data through. More interesting is the client side implementation of this, because this is now quite specific. The client side widgets live in a specific folder in ZK inside it's a class path resource folder, webjars, and underneath there you can create your client side packages. Inside these packages you have a package descriptor, all documented in the client side reference guide from ZK. I'll provide the link in the download later, so you can read about this. I'll just go quickly through what it is. The package descriptor. All you say is whenever the client side requests the ZK leaflet package, it will create a package that contains the widget leaflet map, which corresponds to this file here. It's the same name. And this kind of package can contain multiple widgets. If you want multiple widgets in the same package and also downloaded with the same JavaScript file from the server, this can speed up your application if you just bundle multiple script files in one WPD file. Yes. So we can look at the, now we look at the JavaScript file. We see a few similar things as in our prototype, just slightly different names here, because now we use the client-side object API of ZK's widgets, and we just extend. And we extend a default ZK widget, and that's the name we give it. And the package we just declared, which corresponds to the folder name here. And it has a name, leaflet map. We implement the bind and the unbind function in this case, or we override the bind and unbind function to initialize and destroy the API, or to call the initialize and destroy API function of Leaflet.js. And there's a redraw function that produces the DOM elements for this one, because we just want a div. We just render a div and output the default DOM attributes required by ZK. There's a client-side function that does this already. It's a bit old school to render the HTML with strings like this, but that's what ZK does, and it still works. So no need to reinvent the wheel here. And because we only need a div, I just put this inline. Don't need an extra mold file for this. But you can have larger template files. We call them molds in a separate JavaScript file. And you can configure this in the language add-on. I'll come to this in a second later. So this will just produce the div element. And since we don't have any children, it doesn't need to add any children because the children are added by the third-party library. And then we have the functions we call from server side, the set view functions, where we had the let long So the parameters we call from server side here, they are directly called at the client side here, lat long zoom. Here, these are the parameters, and I just pass it through to the my-map object. I'll just go back. The initialization is the same here. Only in this case, I used OpenStreetMap and not the Mapbox thing, because I found this is easier to set up. It just makes the example even shorter. But in the prototype, I just wanted to follow the quick start guide. So don't be confused. There are multiple layers, multiple providers for different purposes. Whatever you need, you will find somewhere. You can even host your own map server. I don't recommend it, or I don't know a lot about it, but if you're experts, you will know what you need. But it's a tough topic for someone who doesn't know about it, like me. There are too many details. So I just use OpenStreetMap default at the copyright notice and nothing else. And these are these funny tile URLs that generate the current, or that are used to load the current map squares at the specific position and zoom level. Yes, okay, so where do we, here we were at the setView function, and the addMarker function is again just using default marker API of the Leaflet maps class. But I think I'm going too fast. There was one step I was planning to show in first. So it doesn't matter. We've seen the server-side class, the client-side class, so everything is roughly around 50 lines of code for this simple example. And here you can add as many event handlers as you like, implement your click listeners, fire events to the server. And here I even send ID for a marker if there is a marker. This options custom ID, I think, is something that depends on the marker. We will see this. The last bit that's missing for the component integration is how to load these libraries, because our Zool file does not include the JavaScript and the CSS anymore. So we have to somehow load these things automatically. And this is configured in the language add-on, which specifies, for example, which specifies which JavaScript style sheets to load and which specifies the component. So here we just say our component definition contains the leaflet map component, the name, the Java class, and the JavaScript class. There are more parameters, but for this example, I didn't need them, so kept it simple. And as external references, I could put the CDN links here to load this from external files, but I don't want this. I prefer to include these JavaScript files into my application. And here I chose or what you can do is you can go to the website of Leaflet.js and download the JavaScript and CSS file manually, put them into your project folder and load them here. Put them somewhere here in webjs, somewhere as Leaflet, and then maybe external, and then you can reference them with the tilde dot syntax to load class path resources. Tilde dot slash, and then it would be maybe would look something like this. The JS will be there, so just the package name. I don't know, you have to use JS ck leaflet. This must be an F. And for example, X. If you create a folder, new folder here, external libraries, and that's where you can copy the JavaScript and CSS files and reference them like this. But because I'm too lazy, I don't want to copy files manually. I want this managed by Maven, so I chose webjars. Webjars is basically just a jar file that contains CSS, JavaScript, or any kind of client-side resources that are used on the web in a specific format. So they are available from the browser directly into the jar file in most common containers like Tomcat, Jetty, also Spring Boot. They have a way to load the webjars resources directly. It's quite nice. I like this feature. And for this, we just add the webjars leaflet as a dependency in our Maven project, and it will download this library here. It will find the version if it finds it, the 171 latest version, and it has this specific structure for Maven for I think it's a web fragment jar, and then it contains these resource folder webjars. This is default servlet specification about these kind of resources. You see it contains images, and it contains the JavaScript, and also the I think this is the minified, I think this is the non-minified code. So it has multiple versions you can include, but I just use the default JavaScript file here. So in my add-on, I say load this one, and it will load these files by default in the head of the page whenever this jar file of your component is part of the class path. Otherwise, it doesn't load them. Yeah, the webjars, I found this, that they have a nice web page. When does the CSS get loaded, and does this file get cached? This depends on your configuration. We will see this in the browser. I'll show you where it's loaded. So whenever you thinking you want to add a third-party library, you just go to webjars.org and search if it's maybe available. And here for Leaflet, they had a nice integration. Come on, find it. Is it dead? Is this the search box? Yeah, Leaflet. Okay, so here it found it, just the first one. You can pick different versions if you want to test older versions. And also, if a version is not available you want, I usually just click the button and I say, I would like this module to be available. Oops, just Leaflet, go to Leaflet again. Yeah, Leaflet, you click the plus button, and then it will go to GitHub and it will create an issue already where you can request someone to create this for you. And my experience is this happens within a few days, and you get your version. I did this, for example, with Open Layers. Open Layers is another mapping API. I requested, for example, the version 6.5, and it was done within 24 hours. Someone picked up the issue, generated this, and I always say thank you, very friendly, and they're really responsive. So they are making sure that the stuff is available that people request. It's sometimes a bit tricky to find the right module because this is a Bower NPM, so there are different formats, but the default webjar is the one you need for a Java servlet application. So there was this question about how is this loaded and whether it's cached. So we just go to our page. I think because I changed the configuration, I have to restart. We activated all the configuration here, and we go to our component Zool, which it doesn't even need the client-side namespace anymore because you don't need any inline scripts. Okay, yes, application has started again, so go to the component page, and if I didn't do any mistake, it will load. This time the map looks a bit different, has different colors because we switched from Mapbox to OpenStreetMap, but it still works. And also it's loading slightly slower, even though it's quite fast. I think all the tiles are cached on my side. So the question was, how is this loaded and when, and is it cached or not? And right now it's not being cached because I enable the development configuration to disable caching of the resources. But of course, if you enable your production, or if you use the default settings in ZK, it will cache these resources. So in the network, we can see just show me everything that's loaded when the page loads. So it's already cached here. Because it's a webjars thing, so it's already cached. And they make sure you can cache this because every resource has the version in the path. So whenever you switch the version, you have to adjust the paths of these files. So you cache the versions as long as you need them. And if you need a new version, it will be a new URL, so it will load again. And here's the leaflet.js and the CSS file. They are both loaded from the page header. You see it's coming from the cache. If I reload, it's still cached. Other ZK resources are currently not cached because I disable the development. I disable the caches for development. If widget configuration is in language and on a component is not included, then JS files will be loaded. Yes, these will be always included in the head. If you want to load them with the WPD, with the package on demand, you can also do this, but then you can't use webjars. You can add additional scripts here. Just read the documentation on the widget package descriptor, WPD. I just type this for you, widget package descriptor. Because then this file can't be in a webjar. It has to be in your, as I mentioned before, in any kind of web.js folder, and then you can just add scripts here. Scripts, and you say source equals blah blah blah, something.js. Ideally starting with the tilde dot, so it's inside so it's loading from the jar file. And these files will be packaged together with the widget. The CSS files don't have these kind of mechanisms, so the CSS files will always load if you put them, if you don't, no, they will always load as soon as the theme, the default bundle of CK is loaded. This CSS bundle. It's all advanced, too much for today. There are ways to tweak this. If you have a specific requirement, maybe contact our support. There's a way. But the JavaScript can be bundled on demand with in the package. But here, for simplicity, I use the language add-on because I like the webjars more. And this library is very small, so it doesn't hurt to load it. I think it's 35 kilobytes or something. Let's double check. 142 kilobytes unzipped. So the zipped will be smaller. So if we disable the caches and we check again, it hopefully zips it. It didn't zip, but that's the unzipped version, 142. I think it's like 38 gzipped. Yeah, so the component is rendering, and we can move around again. And we also have our marker added. And if I click somewhere, it prints the position. Right now there's no marker. And if I click a marker, it will tell me the marker ID we gave it. This is the POTX marker. And also if we go to POTX, it will go to this position again and zoom in as specified in our composer. Yeah, we say go to the POTX location. It is the marker. And if we click go to POTX, we go to zoom level 18, which is the max level we have here. Yeah, I think that's most of the stuff. These are all the files that are involved here. There is right now no static. Yeah, there are two static images I added for the marker, and for the marker, I don't know why I have two. I just have another test marker. It's not used right now. Just have the marker icon. I think I was planning to add another dynamic marker being added. Maybe we just do this. So when we go to POTX, we maybe add another marker dynamically, just to show that this one is also working. So here we can say my map dot add marker, and then we say we have this method already to create the marker, so marker data, and what we want is the string ID, just another marker, and the lat long will be the, where do we go? We just go to a similar location. It's a new double array. Just go slightly next to it. And then we can say, comma, what is the next parameter? It's clickable. Well, make it true. I want it to be clickable. And what is the marker in icon? I think I didn't even make the marker icon dynamic. Where is the marker icon? Put pop-up data lat link. I knew this question would come, how to integrate the same in MVVM in the same way. the ZK component has events, and MVVM component has commands. I implemented this where you have to call methods to add markers and remove markers directly on the component. If you want this in MVVM, you have to provide setters and getters for bindings, and these setters and getters can contain a list of markers you want to add initially. So there's nothing special. It's like any other MVVM usage. You use the bindings available. Looks like I didn't provide in this example a way to add a marker image or to change the marker image. How did I miss this? Let's see, how does it find the marker image? I think it's just using the default. ZK marker click. Yeah, I don't really have anything special here. Or is there any marker ID clickable? No, I just use a default marker icon. But you can read this up in the documentation and find something about it. Okay, someone already said it's a possibility to change. Yes, you can. Is there a possibility to change icon on Leaflet site? Yeah, you need to. The Leaflet API. So if you want to change something with the Leaflet API, you can just read the documentation there. This is nothing inside ZK. ZK is only shifting around data, and the API calls are done at client side. And if you want to do something else, that's available in the third-party library. So they have their marker API. And here you can specify the icon, which is of type icon, and the icon type is this kind of, has these properties. So if you want to change something, you can specify a different URL just by using this API from inside the widget. So our widget code was here. So inside the add marker, I call the L marker function, which creates a marker using exactly these properties here. I just add a custom ID so I can find my custom data when I click something, because I want to refer to it at the server side. But we could easily add the icon URL here. But where? It says my icon, and then it uses these properties, marker data lat long. So I only use the lat long here, marker lat long, and then icon my icon. So that would be what I have to call. So we have the position, and then we can add, say here, icon equals, and what would it be? Icon URL is the property. Or is it different? Oh, no, icon is my icon, and I have to specify a my icon before this. So this would be something like icon is another object with icon URL. And the icon URL will be, now you're asking something, it's resources static image. So this is image, and this would be marker-icon.png. Let's see if this one works. I doubt it. If I reload this one. Okay, I made a typo somewhere. Show me. And I have to tell me where I did in line 41. It's line 41. Okay, that's where I was. There's a comma missing. Okay. I forgot to recompile. Okay, we go to POTX, and where is the marker? Oh, there's another problem. Init icon. So I call them icon incorrectly. Okay, read the manual. I need to use the L icon function. Okay, L icon. So we say icon equals L dot icon, or small icon, and then pass in the parameters. And I hope the rest is optional, so it doesn't ask me for all the other parameters. icon URL. Okay, Control Shift F9. And now there's a chance this could work. Oh, another syntax error. Well, this happens to me all the time. Icon is L icon. Yeah, just swap the position of these. Yeah. Go to POTX. Okay, it didn't do what I want, but maybe we can see that it tried to load the icon and didn't find it. Okay, reload. The marker icon is the one. Okay, we want the other one. We want the marker, the ugly one. Okay, here you already see it's now offset because I didn't specify the anchor position, so it already used my new, not the default configuration, but my new configuration. Just need to Leaflet.js here. We want the other one that looks different, and then in order to center it, we could use the anchor position properties. Now there's the anchor, the marker. So the top left corner is exactly at the pointer of the pop-up. So we have to use the API to center this. But yeah, I wanted to go to this Chrome. And here there is this anchor position where you specify where is the center of the icon, or what is the position of this one. What was it to be icon anchor? Just do it for completeness, and then we have icon anchor equals, something. What is the size of this marker? It's 64. Okay, so we go to 32,32 so that the bullseye is the center. And reload this page here. Yeah, now it's centered. So this is nothing specific. And again, this one could be a parameter you just pass into this function here. If you want to specify a different marker URL from server side for any marker, maybe you need a shopping marker and a bullseye marker and a atomic waste marker. Just need to put them at a specific place. And this folder static, this is Spring Boot specific. It's very similar to your default Java WAR files and web content folder, where you can put static resources that are just available with standard URLs. So not a ZK resource in this case. Okay, I'm a bit sorry for the for the unfortunate switches to the wrong windows sometimes, and I'm not really concentrated today. Are there questions? I assume there are maybe some more. But otherwise, I think I covered the topics I wanted to cover in a slightly different path. I wanted to provide them earlier, but no problem. You can ask questions anytime. Where is my here training notes? Did I miss something? Yeah, so we have Maven dependencies. We can download and add manually if we want to. I didn't show this, just pointed out where you could put these files, and we create a custom component. Summarize the steps to integrate JS with ZK. No, there was this talk. The talk is a summary. I don't know. If you want to add JavaScript, you add depends on what kind of script you want to add. There's these multiple options I all showed. The starting point is the language add-on. This one defines your component and the component name. And the component name contains the package. And the package name is in webjars, Leaflet.js. So this is one JavaScript file of the ZK widget class. This will be loaded on demand whenever you create this component in your page, and then the widget is created client side. It will download the package on demand. And these other ones is just referencing script files. And you can load them from static resources inside your jar file. You can load them from external jars like we did here from a webjar. You can add your own JavaScript files like this. just put another one somewhere. There are two ways to load them always via the language add-on, or to load them with a package from the package descriptor. I don't know how to summarize this. It's just using the functions that are available to load the scripts. It's really nothing new. It's maybe you want to hear something specific. Maybe I'm missing the target of your question, because summarizing just means repeat everything I just said. So so there's no wrong question. It's just me. I don't understand it fully. So maybe I'm replying to it in the wrong way, because I thought I just showed how to integrate JavaScript during the whole call, and then you can get the download of the recording to listen to it again. Or maybe ask a specific question. Maybe you didn't understand one step, then I can go into details right now. But I don't have another hour to repeat everything I just said. I will get the download. Watch again. Yes, please. Yeah, this it's just a bit confusing today, but you will get the source code as well. I provide the source code. I will provide the run configuration, so you can run this again yourself. It's a Maven project, so you just need Maven, which is pre-installed in Eclipse and IntelliJ, so it's not specific to one IDE. It will run in any, and the execution is really just running a Java class. So it should be like, if, for example, if you're in Eclipse, you just say run the class, and it runs it. What agent? I use the DC EVM. This one here, hot swap agent, here the DC EVM, the dynamic code evolution virtual machine. And I covered this in, I think, two training sessions ago. It has a prepackaged Java 8 and Java 11 version. Here it's called Trava JDK. Somewhere is the Trava JVM, something with Trava. Here, this one. So you just go here and you download the package you need and use this. And maybe ask you, just reply to the email and ask for the session where I covered this, the previous efficient development session where I talk about this in detail. But in this example, we didn't change any server-side code, I think, so we didn't even use this. But there I cover all the ways how to change the ZK application without restarting as much as possible. And the configuration you see here, it's using the hot swap agent core configuration. And I also use a specific ZK class to clear some of ZK's internal caches of properties for EL expressions and for MVVM command methods, so that you can change annotations on your command methods without restarting, for example. So they're all covered in the other session. Takes another hour to explain what is all possible there. So just request the session, or join us next time. We cover again the efficient development part, maybe next year. And I hope they maintain this project and have soon a version for Java 17 when it comes out, because this will be the next long LTS version of Java. I'm looking forward to this, because right now it's only available for 8 and 11. And the Java 8 version of this is a bit difficult to set up. The Java 11 just works out of the box. So I would recommend using the Java 11 DC EVM, easiest to set up. But if you need a different Java version, then obviously you can't use this. Maybe you can just use it to run during development. Even if you need a different compile target, it might just run your code. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Welcome. Welcome. Okay. I think I have to wrap up. Oh, I really wish I wasn't so confused with the windows today. So I have to clean up the video. I hope I don't break it, and I will. Yeah, we will provide the download with the video with the cutout sections. There might be a few problems in the video if I cut out incorrectly. So I'll just stop the sharing and the recording. And I'll stay here for a few more minutes in case you have something to say, just to read the comments. Stop.